Very grateful to be invited to Cranfield University, not least because I graduated from here many years ago, and it's rare for them to invite me back, having experienced me once. I'm Forest Director with the Forest of Marston Vale. Gareth described it as the local forest. It's a forest in the making. It's probably the first most important point to make, just to manage your expectations. So, what is the Forest of Marston Vale? Well, it doesn't exist yet. It's a vision to transform an area of 61 square miles between Bedford and Milton Keynes. It was one of 12 areas designated by the government back in 1991 as priority areas for regeneration. So all of them are sort of post-industrial landscapes. There are some in the northwest, some in the northeast, some the colliery sites across the Midlands. And in our case, we're dealing with the legacy of clay extraction for brick making and then subsequent landfill. So areas that were down on their heels somewhat. So it's an environmentally led regeneration initiative, which is a slightly peculiar thing. And what's even more peculiar is that it came out of government and was given a 40-year vision. Anything beyond a parliament is revolutionary as far as I'm concerned. Unfortunately, it didn't have 40 years secure funding, inevitably, but that makes it exciting and challenging. So it's a partnership approach between local communities, public and private sectors. And the key target is to increase woodland cover from 3% when we started in 1991 to 30% by 2031 over that 40-year period. It's an unprecedented tenfold increase in woodland cover in modern history. If anyone knows the New Forest, drives through it or enjoys it on holidays, New Forest is about 30% woodland cover if you take the whole area. You've got settlements, road infrastructure, farmland, as well as the wooded landscape. So, years to come, something of that sort of aesthetic and landscape is what we're looking to create in this part of the world. And delivery of this vision is now spearheaded by us as the Forest of Marston Vale Trust. We started in public sector, realised that was full of constraints, so removed ourselves, became an independent charitable trust. Where are we talking about? Well, see, this doesn't show up as brilliantly as it could. We've got known entities at the top in terms of Bedford. We've got a red dot, which is our headquarters, base of operations at Marston Mortain, our forest centre. The yellow dot is where we are, Cranfield University. Cranfield University sits within the forest area. The astute observer will notice there isn't a blob associated with Milton Keynes down in the bottom left-hand corner. It's because it moves on a regular basis and we can't quite keep up. It's constantly expanding and growing as the phenomenal powerhouse that it is in this part of the world. That's the 61 square miles that we're talking about regenerating. Why are we doing that? Well, as I said, 100 years of clay extraction for brick making, birthplace of the London Brick Company, which Stewby Brickworks was once the largest in the world. It's quite an amazing thing to realise if you know this area. In the 1930s, about 500 million bricks were being produced a year. 2,000 people employed, massive employer in the local area. Brick production ceased in 2008. I think by the 1990s, there were 200 people employed in the brick industry. So massive growth and then contraction over time. The interesting quirk is those bricks went south mostly and built an awful lot of houses. Those households then sent their refuse back up to the same area because we dug these fantastic naturally clay-lined pits, and they became some of the most important strategic landfill sites in the country. In fact, Brogborough landfill site just down the road was the highest input landfill site in Europe in its heyday. Bear in mind, this is a 61 square mile landscape, relatively compact, world's largest brickworks, then subsequently Europe's highest input landfill site. Quite an impact on a relatively small area. The other factor, which has been around since the 70s, is the area between Bedford and Milton Keynes has been a strategic growth corridor. It's had various descriptions, various rates of change, but the vision has always been fairly constant. But actually, that sort of 20,000 homes by sort of 2021, as the target was, is arguably part of the vision for regenerating the area. It's a matter of how that's done, how sustainably that's delivered. The short version, it's about using trees and woodlands to repair a damaged landscape. And you can help. Everyone always has a vision. We're currently rewriting it but this is the old one. So transforming the area using trees and woodlands, repairing the damage of the past, but actually creating a new, dynamic, vibrant place where people want to live, work, and spend their leisure time in the future, giving it new prospects. The short version of this is transform the landscape, transform perceptions, transform prospects. That's the sequence we're going through over a 40-year period. And the idea is that those new woodlands and wild places provide attractive landscapes, increasing property values and so on associated with that, sort of attracting inward investment, lots of leisure opportunities, recreation, all the cuddly stuff associated with biodiversity and wildlife, and providing a sustainable source of timber and fuel for future generations. So trying to extract as much benefit as we can out of woodlands. In terms of achievements to date, well, we started with 3% cover. We've trebled that to 10%, at least according to Cranfield University students, so I hope they're right. It matches my guess. We delivered a £6 million project to create a new country park and forest centre at the heart of the area, kick-started a leisure economy on the back of that, 20+ million attracted in investment. We've acquired a reasonable chunk of land. We now, as a trust ourselves, have an estate of about 1,600 acres. We didn't expect to own land at all. Worked with over 100 businesses. Loads of, as you might expect, thousands of people have been involved. And we've done a number of fairly high-profile projects showcasing renewables, various awards and bits and pieces. I can't compete with Heathrow, but we were quite proud to become highly commended and sort of runners-up in the Sustainable Business of the Year 2015 as a tiny social enterprise and charity. We came second to B&Q, which I thought was slightly unfair, putting us in the same category. But we're proud to have been runners-up, which is somewhat uncharacteristic of us, because we like to win. So, planted over 1 million trees to date. We've got another 5 million to get in the ground at least. Built a forest centre. That's a thriving social enterprise which actually generates the revenue that subsidises the rest of our charitable activities. So, yes, we're a good cause as a charity, but actually we're a good business as well. We've bought quite a lot of land, created lots of woodlands. They're popping up in sort of chronological order. So you can see we are ourselves starting to build an estate which is predominantly wooded, which needs to find a purpose and function economically, as well as many other ways, into the future. Lots of people involved, and it's all the cuddly stuff about this is for future generations. I particularly like the stripy wellies, which is why I always use this picture, and the look of determination on the fella's face. So, that's all really good. A couple of the other things we've done, showcasing renewables. Gareth, in various guises in the past, has had a hand in influencing our thinking, which has probably ultimately led to some of these achievements. We've got a 1.5 million, 1.5 megawatt wind turbine. We've got 400 square metres of PV array on our forest centre. And biomass. We were early adopters of biomass when we built our forest centre in sort of 1999. We pushed quite hard to say we really need to be leading the way on this. We're creating a forest. By gee, we've got to be using biomass. So we gave that instruction and subsequently discovered that there weren't many M&E consultants around who knew anything about biomass technologies at that point in time. I hope the position is better today. We ended up with a system which came in, a log-based system. It was not fit for purpose. It was mismatched in terms of the output and the cycle of output. So we had to fix that, and we fixed it by tapping up, to put it bluntly, E.ON and one of their grant schemes in order to secure their support for putting in a wood chip system, which we did in, I think it was about 2006. So we now have a sort of a wood chip boiler ourselves, providing the heat to the forest centre. Not a particularly large unit, but it was quite important for us to demonstrate the way forward. The images here it's all RHI accredited, hence the heat meter, top right. Top left is previous chief exec and E.ON, posing for photos, squatting by a barrow of wood chip. What else would you do for a photo? Slightly bizarre. Bottom left is a sort of an eye to the future, short rotation coppice production, stimulating demand for that in the local area, and apologies for the criminal offence that is having a competitor on screen, Mark. But when we first had our unit installed, we were having deliveries from a sort of a regional supplier over in East Anglia who was blowing stuff in. Pleased to say we've moved to a very local supply. So, remember this pattern of things? I'm going to focus in on what Cranfield's doing relates to this really important component at the end here, about the economic underpinnings of a forest. So, we've got 61 square miles to work within. We are charged with a government target, 30% tree cover, 20 square miles of woodland over the next few decades to be created. About 5,000 hectares of potential woodland resource. So, do the maths, making some assumptions about yield class. I should probably apologize in advance. I'm a forester, so I get excited about things like yield class, rather than concrete, possibly. So you're looking at 20,000 cube per annum of a theoretical resource. And that's assuming a very low sort of productivity from woodlands in this part of the world. Sustainably, you probably, using best practice, say you'd take 75% of that out. The counter to that is that for all those yield class calculations, all the work that's been done on modeling volumes of timber is about timber. So it tends to discount that top bit of Mark's tree in his previous slides. That's always been a waste material. Now we're finding a market for it. So actually there's probably, they reckon, about 25% extra volume if you look at it in biomass rather than just timber within all these standard calculations. It also doesn't factor in things like short rotation coppice, more industrial, productive forms of forestry, which we're very keen to see move forward. So the theory is great, but there's an old adage you really have to remember. The wood that pays is the wood that stays. And our big problem over history is that woodlands have lost their economic value. So those who own them have been less inclined to manage them and even keep them. So economics is fundamental to the future of the forest we're creating. We've got an immature and underdeveloped market with many barriers to overcome. Growing it's fine, making it a sustainable resource and managing it is crucial. So we need a market pull to match the policy push. Mark's touched on this already. It's true, actually, if you look at the local area, about 50% of the woodland resource we have is actively managed. That's skewed by a couple of estates in our part of the world. Beyond that, it's probably only about 25–30%. There's no perceived demand for low-grade material, despite what some of us keep telling woodland owners. Haulage costs erode any profit that can be generated, and general owner apathy. So there's a few things to overcome. And there's a lack of a strong woodland culture in this part of the world. Bedfordshire's not a well-wooded county. The Marston Vale is not historically well-wooded. We don't have the foundations or even the roots of that industry in the same way as perhaps other counties and parts of the world do. Given all of this, why would you create more woodland if what we've got isn't being managed because the business case isn't that strong? That's one of the problems we have to solve. So we're looking ourselves to grow the local woodland economy, promoting and supporting large-scale biomass. We've been sort of involved in promoting those things through the planning system, which we have some influence over. We're sourcing our own biomass requirements locally as opposed to bringing it in from East Anglia, and showcasing some sustainable firewood production, and particularly the retail side of that. Now that's really small scale, very much a cottage industry, but it's quite powerful. We have, apologies for a picture of me on the screen, by the way. One of me in front of you is enough, not alone two. We have a forest centre which receives 200,000 visits per annum. It's quite a high footfall, it's quite a high profile location, so we can do our bit to sort of say, actually, burning wood, chopping down trees and using them productively is a good thing, because the public need to be educated that the sound of a chainsaw is a really positive thing, not a negative thing. They shouldn't pick up the phone and complain to someone when they hear one. So we're doing our bit to sort of grow a sort of small-scale, sustainable firewood production locally, actually trying to grow the market for all of our competitors rather than steal business from them. We want more people putting in stoves, burning wood as a supplementary heating system. And we're part of the Grown in Britain campaign and sort of supporting that and other ventures as well. So, coming back to the matter at hand, leading the way. We've got major new biomass installations locally to us. Cranfield University and some other place called Centre Parks. Now, those are potentially great assets for us going forwards. They've got fuel demands that can't currently be met locally. wouldn't even pretend that they could be met locally. There are issues there about the quantity, the quality assurance, reliability and certainty, all the things that if, sitting in your position, if you're thinking about going down this road, you want all those things nailed down before you start investing serious money in biomass plant. We can't satisfy those, not at the moment. But they both have a strong desire to move to increasingly local supply. And the reasons for that are sort of manifold, but fall into two categories, really. Sustainability objectives, whether that's carbon accounting or procurement policies and so on, but also CSR objectives and the concept of sort of triple bottom line accounting, and sort of looking at the added benefit that can be delivered through how you run your business or your organization. And that provides a stimulus to grow a new woodland economy and to unlock an awful lot of benefits for the area as a whole. So biomass equals benefits, and then a bit more is my thought. You won't be surprised. As a forester, I see biomass heating, CHP possibly, in a few years' time when that's been nailed properly, as inherently positive environmentally. It's a great thing. However, if you then move to local sourcing and you foster the development of a supply chain and infrastructure, you're going to add significant additional benefits to that. You get a far better return on investment. So it's local demand, increased woodland management, it's an enhanced business case for woodland creation. We're enriching the sort of natural capital of the area, to put it in modern terminology. Opportunities for new enterprise and employment, as we've already touched on. And also, perhaps importantly for us, Cranfield are sort of showcasing the productive utilization of wood and woodlands. They're not just there to be pretty to look at and nice to walk through. They do all those things as well. But actually, if there isn't an economic underpinning, we've got a real problem going forwards. So in short, it supports the creation of the Forest of Marston Vale. Just by their decision here to install the biomass unit and then move over time, and that time is probably, I guess, a 10-year plus time frame, to local supply. So, just to bring this together, creation of the forest, key driver for the long-term regeneration of this locality, an area which has suffered terribly in its past through exploitation of the natural resources, but without any exit strategy, without any succession plan for what this area then becomes. So socially, it's declined, communities are fragmented because there's no paternalistic employer, as the brick industry once was. Economically, it has no base anymore because those big employers have disappeared. Environmentally, it's a fraction of what it once was because of the impact of those industries. So creating the forest gives it those new prospects. And actually, it does it through exploiting the environment. And I always like to sort of emphasize this, but because people talk about social, economic, and environmental considerations, and it's typical that the environment is the last of the three that they talk about. And it's sort of tacked on the end. Actually, our vision, our model here, is to use the environment as a powerful tool to stimulate the social and economic regeneration. So it's reversing things around from the usual. Cranfield University's biomass boiler is innately positive. It's a fantastic thing to have in the area in its own right, just like Centre Parks as well. But looking to go beyond that and move to a local supply chain multiplies the benefits that you get manyfold. And in terms of, if you were looking at sort of triple bottom line sort of accounting principles, it delivers a vastly improved return on investment if you're factoring in social capital as well and environmental capital into your calculations. So it's about how that decision has a positive impact on the wider community and the area as a whole. So it helps grow the market pull to create the forest. It's going to stimulate and unlock woodland management. And it provides an economic basis for future management. Bear in mind, we're talking about 15,000 cube per annum of resource, albeit quite a few years into the future. We have to have a plan for what's going to underpin that to make sure that those woods pay and therefore that they stay. So you can have all of these three benefits across the top and the wildlife, but actually none of it works unless you have this bottom corner sorted. So biomass is a fantastic thing in its own right, but actually if you look to have that impact more locally, you can amplify that and magnify that benefit many times over. And remember, the wood that pays is the wood that stays. My details are there if anyone wants to know any more. How are we doing for time, Gareth? Excellent. I'm happy to take any questions. I'll leave that on the screen behind me, so it subliminally goes in and continues the indoctrination about the creation of the forest. I have the pleasure of having worked with Gareth in various guises over many years, and actually I think what's happening here at Cranfield is fantastic in terms of leading the way. So not only doing the right thing, but actually looking to plan to the future and say, how can we add value to this? Now, I'm not an expert in the logistics of supply chains and everything else, but we've got a fantastic team over here with LC Energy who are doing all of that. They provide all of that service. So the logical thing for us to be doing is having the conversations we are having, thinking 5, 10 years down the road. How do we work together? How do we put the infrastructure in place? How do we build the supply chain that can deliver these multiple benefits on the back of what Cranfield's done as a university? Thank you for listening.